Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to Super News, where we have truthful news, real views, and hopefully something to amuse. We're calling class together today because I want to talk about my favorite subject, which happens to be talking about my favorite country, the USA. Or as we used to say in Canada, the US, eh? And I want to begin by quoting my favorite writer, William Shakespeare. Shakespeare said in The Tempest, "There are no devils in hell. They're all up here." And he was absolutely right. And unfortunately for us and the world, boys and girls, a lot of the devils up here became president of the United States, including Donald Trump. During Trump's 4 years as president, this country was indeed a tempest of discord and destruction, the destruction of lifelong friendships, even amongst family members. But the worst destruction fell on Donald Trump himself, brought upon him all by himself. But he was not the worst devil. I mean, if you were voting for, let's say, someone who was the most classless, someone who was crude, someone who was klutzy, someone who was a crook, you might be voting number one, Donald Trump, but not as a president. I mean, to me, he was totally incompetent as such. He was about as useless as a president as a condom with a hole in it. But he was not one of even the 10 worst, as you will find out very, very shortly. The best thing to me about Trump becoming president in 2016 is that he brought immediately to the surface the corruption of the system, a system that produces people like him and people like Joe Biden and the others that you're going to hear about very, very shortly. And after the dopey, destructive Monty Python assault on the Senate on January 6th, he brought out a dreadful truth that almost half of all Americans, all of us, are unthinking, unreasoning, dopey nincompoops. I mean, imagine following Q. Anyone who read any of that stuff would realize immediately there was a reason it was not called IQ. And after January 6th, the government and the media inflicted the two worst lies that we were ever buried with in history. The first lie, of course, being that Donald Trump was the worst president of the United States. That lie persisted for 4 years. The other lie persisted since 1776, and that lie was this: every talking head in the country of import, every politician said to us, America is a land where no man or woman is above the law. That's about as misleading and untruthful as a bunch of owners of whorehouses in Nevada saying they have some virgins for us. And all you have to do to discover that these are lies are talk to the ghosts of John Kennedy and Jim Garrison. In 1967, when Jim Garrison arrested Clay Shaw and charged him with conspiracy along with the CIA to murder the President of the United States, every law enforcement agency in this country broke every single law they could to destroy Jim Garrison. Subpoenas were literally torn up. Extradition papers were torn up, and more than a dozen CIA agents infiltrated his office to try to destroy the truths that he was uncovering. And worse than the government was the media itself, which we watched, beginning with CBS, with Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather saying the bullet hits him in the head and his head flies violently forward. Worse than that, NBC, should have lost their license, and Walter Sheridan should have gone to prison. Walter Sheridan was a CIA asset and producer assigned by NBC to totally destroy Jim Garrison's case with a documentary that they would air. And what Sheridan did, he went to New Orleans and bribed Perry Raymond Russo, one of Garrison's principal witnesses, offering him $50,000 to go to California where he would have a job out of Garrison's jurisdiction. But Garrison had Perry Raymond Russo wired. All the criminality was on tape. Criminal charges were filed by Garrison against NBC and against Walter Sheridan. And like Garrison's provable perjury case against Shaw, never got to the courts. However, at that time, we did have what was called the Fairness Doctrine and equal time. NBC had no choice but to give Garrison time late night to show to us that he was telling us the truth. Lee Harvey Oswald could not have done it. Only the Central Intelligence Agency. And the club that owns America, to which we don't belong, as George Carlin pointed out, said, we can't have these kind of truths on television, so they shuttered the Fairness Doctrine and equal time, and we have not had it since. So what we have put together is a list compiled with the help of America's best scholars of the worst presidents in American history. And you'll see that we've had to fudge a little to even try to fit Donald Trump in there as number 10. And in order to make this little lecture to you a little more tolerable, and for me to make it a little more entertaining, I have decided to use this prop right here. Now what this is a trophy that was given to me by Chuck Barris. It's the Gong Show trophy. As a lot of you know, I was the first host of the Gong Show, and if you Google my site or YouTube, you'll see the complete pilot of me in a nice white suit, and you can determine for yourself whether or not I would have been a better host for that show than Chuck Barris, but Chuck wanted to be the Jewish Ed Sullivan, thought he would be better, so he gonged me. He gave me this trophy, signed with love, and a check for $17,500 to go away. And before he went away to Paris to retire, he called me to tell me that he'd always been a fan, and I deeply, deeply appreciated that. So now we are going to use this to start to introduce the 10 worst presidents of the United States. And we have to begin with one who unquestionably is totally the worst because he single-handedly destroyed the United States. It is Bill, on your knees, lady, Clinton. Bill Clinton destroyed jobs and manufacturing in this country by signing NAFTA, which sent all our jobs overseas to Mexico and to Asia. Then to make it worse, he destroyed homes. What he did is he repealed GlassSteagall. GlassSteagall was incorporated into law by Franklin Delano Roosevelt during the Depression 30s. The Depression was caused because there were no regulations on Wall Street or the bankers, which created that depression. So this law was passed, and Billy got rid of it. And as a result of that, millions of Americans, including yours truly, lost their homes. And the Justice Department pointed out at least 200 criminals in Wall Street and the brokerage firms that could be arrested and go to prison. Not one was arrested. Now you would think destroying homes and destroying jobs and destroying the economy is bad enough, but how much worse damage can you do? You can destroy people. And that's exactly what he did. Bill Clinton was the president who ordered the United States Army to firebomb a religious compound in Waco, Texas. 87 women and children were incinerated. And you must think to yourself, oh my God, how could anybody do that? And how could he get any worse? Well, aside from destroying lives and jobs and homes, he destroyed a country next. He destroyed the United States of America. He did something to this country that separated it as the best country in the world until he came along. When we had a free press, he destroyed that. In 1963, when John Kennedy was alive, there were 1,500 different owners of the media, and Billy Clinton in the middle 90s passed the Communications Act that put all of our media into the hands of 5 monopoly corporations. So he becomes the worst president in the history of the United States. And if there is a God, I hope he said to Billy what Billy said to Monica: you're going down. Now to number 2, Lyndon Landslide Johnson. Lyndon Johnson knew that his superior, and I mean superior, John Kennedy, would not come out of Dallas alive. And after he helped murder the President of the United States, he murdered hundreds of thousands more by creating the fake Gulf of Tonkin resolution that created the fake war in Vietnam, killing hundreds of thousands of Asians and over 60,000 Americans. So, for Lyndon Johnson, good riddance. Next comes George. There must be some weapons of mass destruction around here somewhere. Bush, who lied us into Iraq. We destroyed a country, we destroyed an ancient civilization, and we occupy it illegally to this day. And to this day, he is personally responsible for the suicides of at least a dozen young men who served in that war. So, goodbye, George. But the rotten apple doesn't fall far from the rotten tree of his father. George Bush Sr. is the 4th worst president in American history. As a CIA official, he helped plan the faulty Bay of Pigs invasion and obviously helped plan the murder of John F. Kennedy. But worse than that, once he became vice president of the United States, a lot of scholars and lawyers pointed out that he could have been arrested for treason. Because when Jimmy Carter was president and the Iranians invaded our embassy and took hostages, those hostages were to be released to President Carter. But now here we have George Bush, formerly of the CIA, now Vice President of the United States, and his president was going to be Ronald Reagan. So he got a hold of the Ayatollah, and he said, don't release these hostages until Reagan becomes president, and we will give you a better deal. And he succeeded. And he was so pleased with what he had done, he said to a newspaper reporter, if people knew what we actually were up to, they would chase us down the street and hang us. Unfortunately, nobody chased him down the street. Number 5. Harry, I'm from Missouri. You got to show me Truman. Harry Truman showed us that he created the CIA, which in turn created the dreadful fascist national security state in which we now live. If that wasn't bad enough, Germany surrendered in June of 1945, but the Japanese were still fighting us. And they were absolutely days or weeks away from surrendering. But in August of 1945, 3 months after the Germans surrendered, Harry Truman dropped the first A-bomb on Hiroshima, incinerating, vaporizing hundreds of thousands of people. And if that doesn't make a devil, what could make a devil worse? Well, he had one more bomb, and he had to show the Soviet Union that he had it. And to prove it, he dropped it on Nagasaki. And thus started the monstrous, cold, fake war with the Soviet Union. Jim Garrison pointed out that Russia was absolutely no threat to us. They lost 25 million people in helping us win the Second World War, and half of their infrastructure was destroyed. So Harry Truman, good riddance. Number 6, Dwight D. Eisenhower, likable Ike. At the height of Ike's presidency, the Central Intelligence Agency was at its most active. In the early 1950s, the Iranians democratically elected a socialist Mossadegh. Mossadegh nationalized British petroleum because he wanted a better deal for his people with their natural resources. Eisenhower thought it was not a very good example to set for America's oil companies and Arabia's oil companies, so he ordered the Central Intelligence Agency to murder him, and they got rid of Mossadegh. That crime is horrible in itself, but it led to a bigger crime. Eisenhower is a very popular president and a very popular general, and he was well aware of what was going on in this country. And he knew there was a rise of the military-industrial complex, and he did nothing about it. In his farewell speech to us, he left it to John Kennedy, a young president, to get rid of it. And instead, they got rid of him. Ike bogeyed the presidency, and I hope there are no golf courses in hell. Number 7, Richard, I am no crook, Nixon. From the day he entered politics, he was on the payroll of Howard Hughes. And when he became president of the United States, he extended the illegal Vietnam War on his own secretly into bombing and attacking Cambodia, killing hundreds of thousands more innocent people. And then, of course, not to be outdone by his predecessor Ike, he proved that he too could get rid of a head of state. He corralled Kissinger and the CIA and had them murder Salvador Allende, the democratically elected socialist president of Chile, and installed Pinochet, another one of our despots, who helped murder thousands of other innocent women and children and protesters. So Nixon, truly a dick. Now we go to number 8, Gerald Ford, the man who pardoned Nixon, proving to the whole world that there were people in this country who were indeed above the law. Also, Gerald Ford was the eyes and ears of the FBI when he was a member and informant to them of the Warren Commission, a secret commission set up to prevent an investigation into the murder of John F. Kennedy. There was an assassination attempt on Ford's life in California. Squeaky Fromme fired a gun at him, but she was unsuccessful because the bullet hit him in the head. Adios, Gerald. Okay, now this brings us to number 9. We have a 4-place tie for worst presidents and worst devils at number 9. First of all, you have Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was the first imperialist American president. He was the one that set the stage and the tone for the beginning of the fake Spanish-American War, in which we invaded the Philippines and murdered 250,000 people. Then we have Andrew Jackson. Now, the one thing I liked about Andrew Jackson, he was the only president I know of, aside from John Kennedy, who was opposed to a central bank. That's terrific. But what was absolutely terrible, more than all of the presidents combined who helped destroy treaties with the American Indians, Andrew Jackson was by far the worst. He stole 50 million acres of their land. Then we have tied with him Woodrow Wilson. In 1917, America was a very isolationist country, but Wilson lied us into that war, much as Bush Jr. lied us into Iraq. But worse than that, he believed in a central bank, and because of him, we now have the Federal Reserve, a private bank that owns and runs this country, and the Internal Revenue Service. And sadly, I hate to say this because so many people adore him, but it was honest Abe Lincoln who was tied with them. Everyone knows the emancipation was an afterthought to help him get through the very uncivil war that we were fighting. But Abe Lincoln was the first domestic imperialist president. He was the first one to shut down a free press critical of him and his upcoming war. He closed down 200 newspapers. And then what else did he do? He suspended habeas corpus. He actually imprisoned without trial 10,000 American citizens. So, 2, 3, 4 of those guys. Now, that only leaves Donald Trump. We have to now squeeze him in to number 10. But in no way was Donald Trump as ever despotic or destructive a devil as any one of the aforementioned. Donald Trump might still be president of the United States had he done just 1 or 2 or 3 things. And the first thing he could have done was reverse the Fake News Communications Act. But he didn't want to do that, and he told Leslie Stahl in 60 Minutes he needed fake news to attack as an enemy. So he let us down. He also let us down when he failed to pardon Assange or Ed Snowden. So he's not a devil. And we don't know if Joe Biden will be the next devil to occupy the presidency of the United States. It would be wonderful if he were not, but I have my doubts because Jim Garrison said on September 5th, 1981, unless we get to the bottom of the murder of John Kennedy, no president will ever run the United States of America. But if Joe Biden really wants to get rid of COVID, if Joe Biden really wants to cure the economy, if Joe Biden actually wants to bring real justice to this country, the first thing he should do is reverse the Communications Act and give us once again the free press that Jefferson and John Kennedy told us that a democracy could not survive without. The other thing that he has to do is he has to nationalize or get rid of the Federal Reserve, the private bank that runs us to this day. John Kennedy tried to do it in 1963 when he signed Executive Order 11110 and began having the United States Treasury, as mandated by the Constitution, to print silver notes, redeemable by silver by every citizen in this country. We started with Shakespeare. We might end with Shakespeare. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. Now I want to leave you now with something hopeful. And that is this: the 3 absolute wonderful things that I love about this country. The first thing has to be the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the only country on the planet ever to be built on statutes of laws. But right now, unfortunately, today, they read like the 10 Commandments. Wonderful to read. but very hard to live up to. The other thing that I absolutely love about this land is the land itself. No matter where you travel in this country, once again, when we get to take off the mask and get to travel, any place in this country that is not polluted with a mall is absolutely the most beautiful country on the planet. It is a joy to walk on. It is a joy to look at. And third, the other thing that I absolutely love about this country, this is a country that is built by residents and immigrants from every other country in the world, including yours truly. And because of that, we have one of my favorite things here, food. You can go into any small town in this country, and within a block or 2-block area, you will find 12 of the greatest restaurants. You'll find Japanese restaurant, Chinese restaurant, Thai restaurant, Mexican restaurant, German restaurant, French restaurant, all kinds of restaurants. The only country that doesn't have a decent restaurant in this country is England. They have food that is bad as some of our occupants of the White House, except for their fish and chips. So if some of you boys and girls are really boys and girls, and you are in high school or you are in college, and you have some history teacher, or you have some law teacher, or you have some political science teacher, and they start talking to you about the fact that the United States is a country where no one is above the law, I want you politely to raise your hands, recognize and stand up and say, "Sir or Miss, would you still give me an A if I could prove to you that you are absolutely, totally full of shit?" You'd be amazed at how many A's you get, especially from yourself. And so until next time, bon appetit and good luck.